second? No,
And
whatever.
none too patiently, as usual.
Where's Paul LaRochelle, by the way?
He's not gonna.
Yeah.
So it's sick.
Okay, I want to object when we get on the record and everything. I want a formal objection on the record. Michelle's absence.
I will make note. Very quick and succinct meeting. Just saying.
Just a thought.
I don't think it's fair.
Ready to roll with that? You good?
Fairness.
Okay, thank you, everybody, for your patience. We had a couple issues we had to get cleaned up here. Everybody on board. This is the Town of Alton Zoning Board of Adjustment public hearing. Is Thursday, September 2nd, 2021. It's approximately 6:06 p.m. This is the official call to order. Introduction of the board members. We have John Dever, our code official, Frank Rich, vice chair. Tim Morgan. My name's Thomas Lee, I'm the chair, Paul Manzioni, and our alternate. And our alternate, Mike Hepworth.
Something to say,
No, I was just trying to correct the record.
you were the vice chair 3 years ago. You're starting to lapse in your memory.
That's why we have these two separated. I had asked everybody to sign in, which everyone did. I appreciate that for the record, so thank you very much. We'll move on to the appointment of alternates. There are no alternates here for appointment. Do have
Yes,
Mike
we do have
Hepworth.
an alternate. Yeah.
Yes.
So on that part of the agenda, Mr. Chairman, under appointment of alternates, given the fact that Paul LaRochelle, who is a regular member of the board, is not present, then that would require or set up the grounds for appointment of an alternate. And based on that, I would move that the board vote to appoint Mike Hepworth as a member for this evening.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, Mike, welcome on board as a full member tonight. Thank you. I'm going to read through the statement of the appeal process, and then we'll start moving into the cases here. Statement of the appeal process. The purpose of this hearing is to allow anyone concerned with an appeal to the Zoning Board of Adjustment to present evidence for or against the appeal. This evidence may be in the form of an opinion rather than an established fact. However, it should support the grounds which the board must consider when making a determination. The purpose of the hearing is not to gauge the sentiment of the public or to hear personal reasons why individuals are for or against an appeal, but all facts and opinions based on reasonable assumptions will be considered. In the case of an appeal for a variance, the board must determine facts bearing upon the 5 criteria set forth in the state's statutes. For special exception, the board must ascertain whether each of the standards set forth in the zoning ordinance have been or will be met. Okay, that being said, we need to look at the agenda. John, has been any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Could we get a motion to approve the agenda?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman, okay, that we approve the agenda as written.
A second.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, all in favor of the?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, now we'll get into the new applications. The first one on the docket is case Z21-21, FL Merrill Construction Incorporated. Terry McCormick, agent for Susan and Michael Lambert, Christine and Anthony Fay, owners. Map 37, lot 32, Sanctuary Lane, for a variance in the Lakeshore Residential Zone. The variance is requested from Article 300, Section 327A.2 of the zoning ordinance to permit the building within the setbacks. Now look to review and approve the application for KZ 21-21.
Mr. Chairman, may I speak?
Sure.
I need to recluse myself from the board, and I'm happy to see that there are 4 other members here. The Lamberts are close personal friends, and they've done business not only for me personally and my wife, but for our businesses. So in order to maintain the integrity of the board, I will recluse myself from this hearing.
Okay. All right, that being said, let's look at the application for KC 21-21 and see if it's in order, and we'll go forward for an approval at that point of the application.
I'll move that we accept application Z 21-21 as complete.
Second,
I'll second that motion.
okay, all in favor?
Aye.
All right, as reading through case number 1, are the parties present for case number 1? Okay, would you like to come, please? Sit. And if you could just pull the mic down and introduce yourselves accordingly, appreciate it.
Terry McCormick with FL Merrill Construction.
Mike Lambert, the property owner.
Hey, Terry. Okay, thank you very much. Ball's in your court if you'd like to review what you're here for the variance.
I don't know if you have reviewed all the plans I submitted, but in any case, on Sanctuary Lane, the town's right of way, the right of way is pretty significant up in that area. So one corner of the lot is actually almost 50 feet from the roadway. And with a 25-foot setback for from that as well. But the lot is a sloping lot, so it put us substantially out on the end of that slope. And the impacts for the dirt and for the elevations of the home and meeting the 10% criteria for the driveway was such that by putting it within the setback, just put it a little closer to the road, but still maintained significant distance from the road. Other homes in that area are anywhere from 15 feet to 25 feet from the road. There's a lot of, I guess the right of way just in general in that area seem to be significantly different than most of the rest of the road.
The homes that are closest to the road, I guess, were put in before that zone was approved.
I'm not 100% sure about that.
How wide is that right of way?
50 feet. Oh, well, the way the pins, the property pins are, I don't know if you saw them, but this in general thing. But this pin and this pin, these are, this one was like 30 something feet. This one's almost 50. So then with the right of way line, with the setback line, another 25 feet. The way the ground is right here and the impacts, we were gonna extend the culvert anyway. Talk to the highway department. But it just made a lot more unnecessary work and impacts, worried about so on and so forth.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I finished. So I'm just trying to understand this based on the So this is like what, a Google thing or an aerial of some kind,
I
right?
provided that.
You provided that? And this lot that's marked Lambert, that's the lot we're talking about, right? Okay, so, and this is Sanctuary Lane, that's the right of way we're talking about,
Yes.
right? So let's just, instead of using the plan for a second, we use the photograph. This Sanctuary Lane, what does this do? Continue to the left there? And
Yes.
it goes past Lambert?
Correct.
Okay, so down on this lower part of Sanctuary Lane, it looks as though, and Mike addressed this with a question, it looks as though there are a number of residential structures or houses that are likely within the 25-foot setback?
Possibly, yes.
Okay, but we've not really determined that. And then, so this house would be 20 feet into the edge of the right-of-way,
And into the right-of-way setback.
it would be 20 feet into the right-of-way setback.
Correct.
Okay, which would put it how many feet from the edge of the right-of-way or the right-of-way boundary?
Well,
5 feet.
5 feet. 5 feet. So, and we don't know for sure, but you were just talking about how wide that right-of-way is at the Lambert lot location.
it would be at least 50 feet wide.
It would be at least 50 feet wide.
Yeah, that's a fairly modern,
Right. So in the narrative, there's discussion about the house. The closest corner of the house would still be 30 some odd feet from the travel portion of the right of way.
correct.
And one portion of the house may be as much as 45 or 50 feet away from the travel section of the right of way. But as for the boundary of the right of way, it's going to be 5 feet at its closest point.
Correct. Yep.
So what I'm concerned about, just to be very candid, and it's kind of informing my view of requests for variances like this, is, and I've brought this to the attention of the board at the last meeting. Apparently, many years ago, we granted a variance like this for 28A East Side Drive. On the south side of that structure has now been built. I go by it practically every day. I'm astounded at that thing is going up. It's being fully insulated. It's a massive structure. It's practically on the road. And every day I go by it, I say to myself, how the heck in a million years is that house being located where that is? And apparently they were before us. And I don't know if I was absent that night or what, or we didn't fully understand it. We didn't do a site walk. And I just look at it and I see it as something where somebody could, a big cement truck coming around the corner, slide on ice and end up in the second floor of that building, or the snow plow come by and push snow. I mean, the reason for the 25-foot setback is for just that, in part, to prevent to maintain safety distances so that the structures don't get crashed into. Here, there's some comfort in knowing that the structure, even though it's only going to be 5 foot from the boundary of the right of way, there still is, according to what you've described, ample space between the structure and the actual travel part of the right of way. But I think we have to take into consideration the fact that the right-of-way still would permit the travel portion to be extended closer to where the structure would be. And so in my mind, I guess the question I have is, looking at this, this is a private right-of-way, or is it a town right-of-way? I forgot. It's a town right-of-way. So if the town ever decided, I mean, and listen, maybe the town would do it anyway and take the house down by eminent domain or something. I mean, you know, the fact that the zoning board grants a variance does not in any way prohibit or restrict the town's ability to decide, oh, we want to put a big, you know, class 5 road in there and pave it all and make it, you know, with a yellow line down the center and 2-lane road or whatever down the road. Because you build these houses not for 5 years or 10 years, you build them going forward. And so as we look at this, I think we have to consider not how it'll be today or even 10 years from now, but what's the likelihood that that would ever be an issue or a problem. Of course, that's the homeowner's risk, I guess, if that were to happen. I guess in the short term, this is a dirt road at present.
Nope, it's a paved
Oh,
road.
it's a paved road.
As you go down Sanctuary, continuing north, there's a cul-de-sac.
I say,
I think
Yeah, I think I
there's
read that.
2
see it right
homes beyond.
right, I think I read that in the narrative too.
This is tax map.
Okay, yeah, I saw,
Right.
Right.
This is their lot.
right,
This lot is the house that's right down there at Curtis Court.
right.
And so.
That's
they're
close,
there.
that's probably
right.
in the setback.
Well, that, I don't know that that's in the setback to 20.
Oh, on east side, yeah, yeah.
28.
Okay, yeah,
And then this is presently the last house on, and it is the one that's
Yep.
that one there,
okay,
okay?
yeah,
There's the cul-de-sac.
yeah,
And there's only 2 lots, and I'm not sure about this one. I know this one is undeveloped. but
yeah,
This one, I think it may be undeveloped, but that's the only, this is this house here.
yeah.
So, you know, if there's any more, it would only be opportunity for it to be developed.
But if the town wanted to expand that road at some point, given the fact that on the opposite side of Sanctuary Lane, well, actually, no,
There's
those,
2 houses there.
yeah, there's 2 houses there. The logical thing to widen it would be to come on this side where there are currently no structures, but as you get farther down, you encounter a structure. It's, yeah, I mean, the part that to me is reassuring is that the house, even if this were granted, would still remain a good distance from the travel way as it currently exists. But the town would have the right, given it's a town road, at some point to say, we want to use the rest of our right of way and maybe reroute the road in a way where they would expand it into that. And I guess it's important, you know, for us to consider that. And I think it's important for the homeowner to take that into consideration for whatever level of risk that may pose going forward. It may not pose any, but so those are my thoughts, and this clarified a lot for me. So thank you.
In order for that road to move like that, I mean, you can take a look at the whole thing in its entirety.
Yeah.
'Cause that's what we do for a living is build.
Yes.
You'd really have to put quite a drastic hook to it, you know? Typically what we see in widening a road, you know, you might, even if it went 10 feet,
Right,
it's not gonna go 30 feet only at this point because this is the furthest most and then hook right back.
right,
You know what I mean? They're gonna, most everything is done, you know, trying to straighten out sight lines and so on and so forth. So
right.
not that I'm disagreeing with,
No, this is helpful to me because you have
but
the
the
experience.
the sight distance isn't gonna work better by pushing it over towards their house.
Yeah,
I mean, there's just no significant benefit for the town of Alton to do that.
Right.
Not to that degree to get within where that could be an impact to that house.
right,
But so few lots left to develop down in that area. And as soon as you go past basically their lot, that goes back down again. So the next house down, actually, where they are, it's, you know, it drops probably 15 or 20 feet.
yeah,
Makes it a little more conducive for their driveway to come in differently.
Yeah.
But
Right.
In any case.
I mean, that makes sense, what you're saying in terms of road construction, sight lines. You don't make a road more difficult to navigate if you're going to change it or whatever. I mean, I guess the only bizarre thing you could think of down the road is if if the town someday decided, they'd have to take all these houses and widen it. But I mean, what would be the likelihood of that given this area? So yeah, I get it. That's now, one other area, if I could, so, and I think I read this in the narrative also, it might have been in the site head feedback. Moving that house back farther away from the right of way, the lot would not accommodate that.
It would,
Topography there is,
right, if you see the lines that are significantly wider apart, that is the flattest area. And as they get closer together, that's the steepness of the slope
Yeah.
going down over that hill. There's some material that has to be brought in anyway.
right,
But if you pushed it out to get any kind of level ground to even get the foundation in, the slopes have to then be pushed significantly to get it, as well as, we're trying to keep in mind that you guys, the town's ordinance on the driveway is a 10% slope. The flatter this land is up this way, the less likely that we need to pick that house. It's still a single story house, a drive under garage. So it's not like it's going to be an impact to any of the neighbors as well for their sight distance.
I say.
Just have a question. I'm trying to get a feel for the topography. If I'm looking at this, looking at the topography, it looks like the lowest corner of the house is at 80 feet and down here is at 42 feet. What's that distance? It's a 40-foot drop over how big it, or 38-foot drop over how big a distance? I don't have a ruler, so.
I have the distances on the property. No, down to the bottom, I think is where he's talking about. But I have the property description.
House is going to be about 35 feet deep
Right,
from the depth of the house from the front of the road.
so the front two pins, I believe, were 150 feet. So I think it's like 250 feet down that side. I was looking for the.
It's the front property line's 150 feet. The northernmost property line is where the angle cuts is 325 feet. And then the other one is 419 feet. So in that drop is probably in about a 35 or 40 foot distance from the front of the house to the
It's
backward.
it's a significant, I was just trying to figure
Yeah.
out drop. I just trying to figure out how big of an area that happens. Or I mean, it goes from 80 feet at the back of the house to 42 feet. That's a huge drop.
Right. The road is at about, if we start at 100, the road is about 100 to the back corner of the house. The existing topography line is 80.
Yep.
So we're looking at a good 20 feet, 20 plus feet.
In the house, and then from 80 to the corner of the lot is another 38-foot drop. Okay, thank you.
Sure, absolutely.
Just for clarification on the plan, so what's the 3-bedroom house depiction? I don't,
So in 1997, the town of Alton actually approved the septic design. And I assume the home as well, because it was the previous owner never built. And the septic design expired. So with that being said, they were proposing a 2-bedroom home, drive-under garage, and just showed where we'd rather have the
The 3-bedroom house that was proposed for approval of the septic and so forth, though, was located completely
outside of. the-
outside of the setback. So whoever did this plan apparently had determined that it was feasible to construct a 3-bedroom home and not encroach into the right-of-way setback.
But I'm not sure that in 1997, the same conditions, meaning the driveway ordinances, the 10% grades and so on and so forth, if all the same were then. And didn't see the likelihood as to why. I mean, they're not even close to that. They decided to put it out further for some reason.
Right.
Don't know what their house design looked like or anything.
Well, just looking at the proposed footprint.
Must have been planning either to do a lot of filling or a lot of excavating. That
Right.
is that sits almost in the middle of that very steep slope. Don't know why they would design it that way, but
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's why it didn't get built.
Right?
Right. Thank you.
Okay, anything further?
Questions from the board?
Other questions from the board? Mr. Lambert, anything you want to add?
No, I just think we were just trying to build it as inexpensive as possible. Once it got below that, it was kind of whether or not it was worth doing. You know, to bring that much fill in, so.
All right. At this point, I'll open the hearing up to any public input. If anybody in the public would like to express any input in favor of this project, please come forward and announce yourself and express whatever that opinion is in favor. Sure, sir. Come right forward. Yep. And for the record, if you could just state your name and express, well, your opinion about being in favor of this project.
Hi, good afternoon or good evening.
Yes.
My name is Ricardo Amasquita. I live across on 80 Sanctuary Lane.
Okay.
So I'm well aware of the drop off of the land, and I give them a lot of hope to be able to build that. They seem a very good couple, and we've already met a good couple of times. And so I totally support the proposition to build there.
And how about the view from your perspective, from your property? Does it drop off that much? Are you looking at the roof? Are you looking right over the house?
It's pretty high up. And the view is in the wintertime very nice because it's the foliage, it's gone, and so you can see the bay. And but aside from that, in the middle of the summertime, it's pretty a lot of trees and so forth.
Yeah, because on the depiction here with the elevations, you're at least, there'll be at least a good 20 to 30 feet below you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for attending. Appreciate that. Is there anybody else in the public that had any input in favor of the project, in favor of it? Okay. I'll also now ask the public if there's anybody who is against the project in the public, anybody in the public who is against this proposal for this variance. Okay. It would be a no. At this point, I'll close the hearing to any public input. No other questions or concerns from the parties or the board. We'll then move to the worksheet for this variance. Would you lead us off?
Yeah. The first area is public interest. I'm going to say the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. And the reason that I say that is because we've explored this issue. I think there were good explanations about the configuration of the road. The public interest, of course, is to maintain safety and function of right-of-ways, both public and private. Therefore, there's a setback to keep structures, out of there, from creating a hazard or prohibiting the road from being maintained, plowed, and so forth. But here, the record establishes that the structure, although only 5 feet in places from the boundary of the right-of-way, is nonetheless a good distance from the travel way. And from the evidence presented, it doesn't appear that that travel way is likely to ever change. And so I think this structure will be built in a way that won't undo the reason for this ordinance. And therefore, I think that it will not be contrary to the public interest.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
The spirit of the ordinance, the request is in harmony with the spirit of the zoning ordinance, the intent of the master plan, and with the convenience, health, safety, and character of the district within which it's proposed. It looks like this house will conform to pretty similarly to the homes that are already there, so I agree. The request is in harmony with the spirit of the zoning.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree as well.
Substantial justice. By granting the variance, substantial justice will be done. I think the benefit to the applicant outweighs any detriment to the public as a whole.
I agree.
I agree with
I
that.
agree.
Values of surrounding properties. This request will not diminish the value of surrounding properties. It was duly noted by the landowner, and there's not many options available here. So we're either looking at a plot of land going forward, or at least we're going to have a fairly nice 2-bedroom home. And I think it was duly noted by the board members here, the questions that were posed, why we're going into this right of way. But I think based upon everything that's been discussed with this elevation height, I think this will not diminish the value of the surrounding properties.
I agree. It will not diminish the value. There's been no evidence that values will be diminished by any of this, and there's been no objection.
I agree for the reasons.
I agree.
Hardship. For purposes of this subparagraph, unnecessary hardship means that owing to special conditions of the property that distinguish it from other properties in the area, 1, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the general public purposes of the ordinance provision and the specific application of that provision to the property. And that's what I've been saying based on what was presented to us. The purpose of this ordinance is not going to be undermined in any way by what is being proposed here. So there's no fair and substantial relationship between the general public purpose and the specific application. There's no reason to apply it specifically here. And the other thing I would add is that the amount of work and expense that the homeowner would have to go through and incur to get out of that setback would, I think, create a hardship in a way that is unnecessary and is not going to benefit the town. And then two, the proposed use is a reasonable one. The use is for a residential structure, which of course is a reasonable use.
I agree for those same reasons.
I agree. I think the topography here is a hardship that has to be addressed.
I agree as well. Okay, any other further discussion? Okay,
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve application Z 21-21.
okay, we have a second.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, congrats, Mr. Lambert. Mr. McCormick, thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for your time. All right, at this point, we'd like to reinstate our member Frank Rich from his timeout.
Oh, it was very refreshing being on the other side. I will say that it seemed to me that Attorney Monzione was, as usual, very eloquent in his commentary, although it was long.
Thank you.
I've
Thank you.
dealt with Mike and Sue a lot. I really think highly of it. Now that I know that you're their close friend, I'm gonna have to.
It definitely slighted this.
Reassess, definitely
Yeah.
reassess.
Yes.
I will recommend him. He's an incredible craftsman,
really?
builder.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if, and now that he's up here, he's kind of stopped his business, commercial business. But boy, if you could ever get him to do anything around your house, he's very good.
Well,
Excellent.
It's good to know. All right, at this point, we'll move on with the new applications. This one is KZ 21-22,
Don't steal my work.
-23, and -24. If the parties are present, if you please come forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make the statement that although it's three requests, the exhibits are common to all three. We separated because it's three different structures that are being requested.
Excellent. If you could just introduce yourselves, I appreciate it.
Stephanie Richard of Changing Seasons Engineering.
Brad Smith, Executive Director at the Alton Bay Christian Conference Center.
Okay, Stephanie and Brad, we're going to take a moment here and review your application.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we accept applications Z 21, 22, 23, and 24 as complete.
Okay, could we get a second?
I would second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Can I, before we get started, ask a question? If there are only 3 cottages, why do we have 4 cases?
We have cases 22, 23, and 24.
Yeah, it's just 3 cases.
Oh, okay. I saw 21, 22.
That's the year.
Oh, okay, so we only have 3 cases. Okay. I thought I heard you say 4 cases. Okay, but I could have been wrong. Sorry about that.
I'd have to put him back in time all the way.
Could I ask a
Yes.
question procedurally? So, and I read this stuff, but I'm still a little confused historically, especially based on the stuff in the application itself. This planning board stuff here, approval and so forth, but is this same project for these 3 structures approved once by the zoning board of adjustment?
Go before zoning or just?
I mean, how would it get to the planning board without the ZBA? You can't do anything in,
Well, at the time, the time they went, this was the area that was primarily damaged during the fire and
Right.
destroyed.
right,
So at that time, they went to the planning board to replace some of what was there.
right,
And there is a provision in the zoning ordinance for things that are destroyed by fire or natural disaster that you have the right to replace them within a 3-year period, if I remember correctly. That's part of our zoning.
I don't think it was part of the zoning then. And number 2, as we all know, everything in that Christian Conference Center is non-conforming, everything. You can't do anything in there without ZBA because it's all those structures are in non-conformance to be on one lot. So the whole thing is in non-conformity. So if something was voluntarily, it used to be,
They did.
they went to the
Came
ZBA.
to the ZBA, and I remember, and I was thinking about the other day, the specific reason for that was Richard Uchida was their attorney at the time.
Okay,
And I remember him talking about the lease, that the way the leases are written, that you couldn't do it today, but they're very specific. But this was right as I got here.
right. So, wow, it's been that long. So I was on the board. I've been on the board that long. Tim's been on the board that long. So, 10 years ago, 15 years ago,
So it's
20
been
years ago,
11
almost,
years.
we've been on the board. But so what I'm thinking is that it would save a lot of time and aggravation perhaps, that if this is simply a situation where the applicant's approval by the planning board, because after they came to the ZBA, they then had to go to the planning board. I would assume also that the ZBA approval, whatever it was probably a special exception, expired as well.
At that time, they did not institute, the expiration was not codified until 2013.
But I think there was a statutory, and I don't know this to be the case, but I think, you had to put a shovel in the ground or something within 2 years or whatever. I mean, you didn't have to complete the project, but you had to have started it. I think, I assume the same may be true of the planning board
It's definitely
approval.
true- Definitely true of the plan.
Definitely true of the planning board. I think we may have expirations on the special exception granting. I think, and to the extent that it won't specifically say that in the granting of an application, I think that statutorily they may expire also. But my point is, assuming that both things have expired, I mean, the applicant is here today to get ZBA approval of a special exception application. My point is that if nothing has changed in terms of the projects themselves, in other words, if the only reason the applicant is here today is because of the expiration of the planning board and or the ZBA granting, and nothing has changed, then why couldn't the ZBA simply apply the same criteria to the same request and come to the same result, other than the fact that some of the members are now different members and I guess may take a different view and therefore have the right to say no, even though it was one. So I guess if it has expired, then you run the risk, if you have to start the process over again de novo, that you may be in front of people who are going to take a completely different view of the facts and the application of those facts to the criteria and therefore deny it.
Could I
In any
interject?
event, it would be good to see what was done.
Could I interject 1 second?
Yeah.
On this letter that was submitted, this is from 2017, and this was from the town planner to Mr. Smith, stating the planning board determined that because the conditions precedent to the approval of the site plan have not been met despite several time extensions, the site plan will be considered null and void. And then it goes on to say, any future plans for development of the site will require new applications in compliance with state and local requirements in place at the time of the application. Please bear in mind, however, the variances and special exceptions may remain valid and should be investigated prior to submission of any new application. So
So
I
that's
think
what
the
I'm asking.
relevancy, right, that's,
That's what I'm asking. If the variance is still valid, it's not a variance, it's a special exception. So in other, whatever it was that the applicant first obtained from the ZBA back then, that enabled the applicant to go to the planning board, and the applicant received approval and then didn't do anything in the applicable time, and therefore they're done. But does that mean they have to be back here? And if they do have to be back here, did anybody think about giving us the same materials that were used the first time, so we're not reinventing the wheel, and the board would get to see what the other board did, even though we still may have the right under the law to take a different view? And should we be taking a different view? Should we be entertaining this, or is the other thing still valid? These are the preliminary questions that I think have to be answered before we
I
go
think
through
there's
this
another
process.
preliminary question as well. If in fact there was not at that time something in place that would cause that to expire, a ZBA opinion to expire, then maybe it never has expired.
That's what I mean, yeah,
And that's what I was trying to say.
right.
Up to 2013, there were no unless the board specifically set an expiration date.
But the only, and I heard that, but,
I'm talking about in statute.
oh, in the
In the
statute as well?
statute,
Okay,
the requirement that they now have, we now have a 2-year deadline
right,
with these, that was put into statute in
Yeah.
2013, which was after these were done. If you want to give me a minute, I'll go,
I mean,
It may be that they don't need to be here.
that's right.
and that's
the point.
that I had didn't, you know.
And here's the significance for us as a board. We don't want to sit here and be making legal determinations that aren't supported, in the law. And the only thing is, I mean, the applicant should really figure this out and have figured this out before coming here. But we don't want to do something contrary to what the prior board did, make a decision on a decision that's already still valid or whatever. So it's almost like, a continuance until this can be decided, or if there's a way to determine it this evening, but this may be an unnecessary thing to do. And I'm saying that even if it is necessary, and I don't know the answer to that, but even if they do need to have another application, to me, what would be beneficial to me sitting on the board would be to see everything the prior board did and based on what, and not reinvent the wheel. We may agree with the prior board's decision.
We may not have the authority to disagree with the
Well,
prior.
that's the other thing. So it's an exercise that I don't want to, not comfortable going through until we understand where we stand procedurally. That's the only thing I'd say.
So I can go I can go and get the file now, or, locate the file, or as you wish.
And I think it's up to the applicant. I mean, obviously, these are our concerns, but, and one of the things that could be looked at first and foremost, and from my opinion, not to give advice, but just from what I'm seeing, is, as John is pointing out, if back when this, I don't even know what the application was, I'm going to assume it was even then an application for special exception, it probably was. If back then, when it was granted, there was no deadline, it didn't expire, it stayed into existence. Now, as we say, I think state statute has it expire. You can apply for an extension while it's still valid. During the time it's still valid, you can come in and ask for additional time. But if it didn't expire and it's still in effect, then you probably don't need to be here. And if the planning board expired, which they've notified you apparently that did, and back then I guess there was a deadline, then you probably just need to go back to the planning board. But that's the threshold question for me. And I think that should be answered.
So how do we want to proceed from here?
Well, I think it's up to the applicant. I mean, my feeling is I would probably make a motion to this board, depending on what the applicant decides to do, before we spend any time or sit here and make decisions that we're not sure we should be making in the first place.
Or
I've-
are even authorized. to
Or
make.
authorized to make. I would probably, make a motion to the board that we consider a continuance, but rather than the board do it, the applicant can,
The advantage to the board doing it was count against them.
that's true.
Right. Mr. Chairman, let me ask the applicant right now. This 2017 letter that you submitted, did you by chance look into, please bear in mind, this is quoting Nick Strong at the time, please bear in mind, however, that variances and special exceptions may remain valid and should be investigated prior to submission of the new applications. Did you do any investigation on that? No, we didn't. Okay, so that's important. Okay, because if you didn't, okay, then we're kind of in a quandary here. So was my question.
Does the applicant understand there's been a lot of verbiage going here, but do you understand where we're at?
Yes, yeah, definitely.
You may not even need to be here.
Right, I see
So
that.
I think it would be in all of our due diligence through John's efforts, he can research this in your own efforts. And this continuance might be null and void because you might not even have to come back. If we went forward per se, we don't even know, based upon the legalese, we don't even know if we made a decision, if it would be even a proper decision or would even follow the state statute.
And the only thing I would add to that, John, is it would make me more comfortable if the applicant is the one making that determination on their own, rather than taking, legal advice or legal interpretation necessarily from you, what they should do or should not do. I think the applicant should determine what was said in that letter back many years ago, that the ZBA granting of whatever you obtain from the ZBA may or may not still be in effect. I think, and that's something that should be determined not by us, but probably by you. And then if you have to come back, you can tell us why you had to come back. And then if you do have to come back, it's just a suggestion. I think that if this board, unless you're changing the request, unless these structures are different or what you're seeking is something different than what was originally granted, then I think it would be nice to include in the application the decision of the board, the basis that the board made the decision on, because it may be us just looking at the same thing and going, geez, we granted it then, nothing's changed, we'll grant it now. you know, at least if I'm on there and I granted it, then if I voted to grant it and nothing's changed, I may have the legal right to change my mind, but I probably won't.
I guess I would I mean, what is being proposed now is very different than what was proposed then.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Very, very.
Yeah,
Okay.
what we were looking for at that time was a larger project, including 26 new structures. We were going to be required to put roads in, drainage, you know, a lot of other things that we were required to do. This is the thing we're looking for now is to put just 3 cottages on land that aren't going to require any roadways. The water and sewer is right there. It's just a matter of connecting it. Same thing with the electrical. So it is a totally different project than what we were looking at, you know, 10 years ago,
I
8
say,
years ago.
Which I guess is why, at least from my view, why I never would have even thought to look at old approvals because it's such a different proposal.
Yeah, it's almost like that plan is just gone.
okay. So,
That being said.
yeah, I mean, is it the same were those same 3 structures part of the original approval?
Well, they weren't, not in the exact location where we're putting them now.
I
They
see.
would have been included in that 26 that they approved us for.
So then maybe we're just starting completely from scratch then.
Yeah, I mean,
I would, yeah.
yeah, in my experience, it seems that if a
Okay.
project changes, then it kind of has to come back before. So that's kind of
I thought
why we
this,
ended
from
up here.
what I read in here, it seemed like the reason you were here is because the prior approvals had expired and you were seeking to obtain them again. But if
Yeah,
really
not
you're
quite.
doing something from scratch here,
The
Yeah.
main thing with the first plan that we had, it was a major plan, like I said, which was going to include massive infrastructure. This is just, these can just be built with what is already there and existing.
Which if that had been built, then you wouldn't need these 3, but
Yeah.
it never
Right.
was. So we're kind of back to square one.
that helps.
Does that change,
I think it
what the thought process is for the board? Okay, because they're actually going for a variance for something that is new.
right.
It was not what was contemplated. Am I saying that correctly? It's new, not contemplated what was originally planned. And I gotta think, because I remember seeing that plan, and it was pretty comprehensive. I was not on the board, but it was a pretty comprehensive plan. I think there was over 26 buildings that you were
Yes.
trying to do all at once. And it was pretty extensive. If I remember, Spain, I think, was the contractor at the time.
Right.
Yeah.
What ended up happening was it was so extensive that it came that just the infrastructure was gonna cost over $1.25 million.
Right.
So that was one of the reasons
It was
that,
pretty,
you know,
it was
we
pretty
decided-
comprehensive.
We decided not to go forward with it. It was
Sure.
just-
Sure. And very understandable.
Does the fact that this project is much less extensive matter? If it's different, even though it's different from the original one, if they had gone back then and only built 3 structures and didn't go with the full plan they had in place, it still it was approved. So the fact that this is far less extensive than that does that even matter in board's decision-making?
I think
Or
it's
does the-
apples and oranges.
Is it?
One is completely different than the other. And that's why I think this is relevant to be heard tonight, because it's a new application. I was under the same understanding that this was related to their previous approvals. And now they're going forward with it, which they didn't originally, now they're going forward with, but the original plan was completely different as you detailed. So that's in my opinion, this is a new application and we don't need any backup criteria because it's completely different from the original project.
Right. So we're starting from scratch. What you want to do with these 3 structures is different than what those 3 structures were going to have done under the original plan. So I guess if this is a whole new thing, then we probably give no consideration to what's occurred in the past, and you're coming back anew, if you will.
The old plan would be irrelevant.
Right.
If the old plan
Right.
was these three buildings in pretty much the same
If it was
place, that's
pretty
a
much the
different-
same, that's one thing, okay?
that's
We're
different.
talking, it was 26 buildings.
Yeah.
It was a huge project, huge.
So then I guess my only question is, there are three separate applications for three separate structures. I gather it'll all be presented in one presentation, but then we'll have to do a separate determination for each case or each structure. Right, as we do that. As we're down here as three cases.
Okay, well, I will go forward and read the case into the record, and then I'll turn it over to you, Stephanie and Brad, to give us the information going forward. So this is KZ 21-22, Z 21-23, and Z 21-24. Changing Seasons Engineering PLLC, agent for Alton Bay Christian Conference Center. Bradley Smith, Executive Director. Map 34, Lot 33. ABCA cottage number 1, 2, and 3, Beacon Ave. It's a special exception being requested in the Lakeshore Residential Zone. A special exception is requested from Article 300, Section 320A and D4 of the zoning ordinance to permit the expansion of use by the construction of said three cottages.
Mr. Chairman, I thought as far as what zone it's in, that's a typo. It's actually in the residential zone, not the Lakeshore residential.
So this is a special exception in the residential zone. Got it. Okay. With that, Stephanie or Brad, if you'd like to present your case.
Sure. We've already talked about a lot of it. Years ago, they were granted permission to rebuild the structures that had been destroyed. That didn't happen. Now they're looking to build these three small cottages. There's existing roadway going up to it. There's existing utilities going up to it. There's an area next to it has plenty of space for people to park in it, so they don't need to do anything extra as far as parking spaces. Kind of on the inside of the lot, so it shouldn't really affect any of the abutters right on the lot line or anything like that. I don't really have that much else to add about it. Do you have anything? As I said, we've already talked about a lot of it.
Mr. Chairman. Yep. I know you're making a presentation for all three, and we just discussed how we'll deal with it. We have to determine each one separately, but with regard to these three cottages, are they going to be constructed? You're proposing to construct them on sites where there were three cottages that existed prior to the fire?
Those, the way the houses were before the fire, as most of you are probably well aware, they were very close together. So these three are probably going to take up the space of where there may have been 5 or 6 cottages, because they were a lot smaller, closer together and everything. So this area will have 3 cottages, but there were more than that on that space prior.
Okay, so the special exception zoning ordinance is that if there's a non-conforming structure that is destroyed by fire, let's say, or voluntarily removed, then the owner has the right to apply for a special exception to rebuild the structure that was destroyed, in this case, destroyed by fire. Okay, and that's a special exception.
Correct.
All right, so from what I'm hearing, it doesn't seem like that's what's happening. It's not like I had this cottage that was, 15 feet from the high water line. So it's,
We're not talking about a non-conforming structure. Talking about a non-conforming use.
because of the multiple uses. But the zoning ordinance that talks about rebuilding a voluntarily removed or destroy, one that's destroyed by fire is with regard to a non-conforming structure.
But that's not in effect here because that has a 3-year deadline.
So this special exception is,
For expansion of a non-conforming use.
so this is being sought under 320A and D4. A. The expansion and non. So we're looking at expansion of the non-conforming use. The non-conforming use being multiple dwelling units on one lot.
Yes.
That's a non-conforming use.
Yes.
We want to expand that non-conforming use because we want to add 3 additional structures where there should only be one. Under the ordinance, there should only be 1 residential structure. There are 26 of them. I don't know how many there are presently, but now we want to add 3 more to however many are there. So we want to expand the non-conforming use by 3 additional structures. And that can be obtained by special exception. As long as it does not substantially change the nature and purpose of the original use. Expansion, alteration. By the way, they're talking 320D4, but they have to meet all these criteria. It's not just 4. They got to meet everything.
How many structures are on the 28 properties now that are habitable?
On that one site, including the RVs, 135.
135 structures? And when you say the one site, the site that I'm looking at,
Right, lot map?
That-
34.
The one lot.
Whatever it is.
that whole,
Yeah, mhm.
Yeah.
34,
that whole
33.
28 acres,
Right.
approximately 135. This would add 3 more.
So that's 3 more.
And there's a lot of vacant land that's right next to it.
Correct.
You plan on adding more cottages?
No, when we had the fire, we lost 42 cottages. We're only asking just to put back those 3 now. At this time, there's no plans to build any other cottages.
So there is no plan to do more than these 3 cottages?
Many of the 42 that were lost in the fire were reconstructed up till now, weren't?
None of them. Yeah, well, one that's closest to Mount Major Highway, that one has been reconstructed. And we're,
Right.
The one that just got built.
Just got built, right.
and we're adding those 3. So
Right.
out of the 42 that we lost, we're only putting back 4 this time.
And that hill remains, it's all a grass field.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So the 42 where the vacant land was?
Correct.
Right.
So the interesting thing about building structures on this lot is that there are no setback requirements for any of those structures because the setbacks are determined by the lakefront, which doesn't apply, boundary lines. Well, there would be setback on boundary lines if they were by the boundary lines.
Right.
Or right of way. So where are we on that, on those issues with regard to
There are requirements for setbacks to each other,
structure to structure?
structure to structure.
What's that requirement?
I believe we're at 20 feet between the two, each of the structures, drip edge to drip edge, 20 feet.
Okay.
And that was
that's
established as part of the earlier plan.
No, but, so that was part of the plan, but do we have a zoning ordinance on? No, there's no zoning ordinance on it.
That was
Maybe
determined
building code stuff or
fire
fire, okay.
code.
And that's fire code stuff.
Yes.
And then the plan they went to the planning board with had those requirements in it.
Yes.
And they made that representation. But the important thing is, for our purposes, you're making that representation to us that you're going to be at least 20 feet drip edge to drip edge from structure. What are you going to be? Is it going to be
20,
just the
yeah.
20 feet?
Yes.
Okay,
Which is part of our policies
yeah,
on the.
At the
also.
conference
We
center.
require that.
yeah.
I think we had that prior to you.
What about other setback issues as far as where these structures are located in proximity to boundary lines or rights of way that involve this lot? Where are they in relation to that?
I mean,
Is there no issue?
yeah, I mean, we're plenty far from property lines, building in between. I don't know if you would call Beacon Ave a right of way, but that's the kind of the access in for over 20 feet.
25 feet?
Yeah. something
Yeah,
like that
well,
Probably.
The setback is 25 feet from the edge of the
Right now,
road.
Beacon Ave as a roadway basically ends right here now. Unofficially goes up to circle, but it's not really a roadway anymore. They just drive through
Yeah,
a field, which
Yeah,
used to
that's what I'm
be.
getting at. I don't know if it's a right of way, but that's the
right. Well,
access.
I
to
mean,
it.
that would be another issue is whether it is a right of way, private or public, whether it constitutes a right of way or whether it just became something people,
Yeah.
use or whatever. But, okay. So you're representing no issues in terms of boundary line or right of way setbacks as to the location of these structures. And they're going to comply with a 20 feet separation requirement from drip edge to drip edge.
Is that what the
Right.
dashed line is around each unit?
Yes, that 20 feet.
Because there
yeah.
is a structure, there are structures behind number 3 as it's depicted, but that looks like it's even
Right,
on
and
the map.
that's, yeah, that's outside of it as well, yes.
Okay.
That's why the circles.
Yep.
I think you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, sorry. I think you mentioned that there was a brand new sewer system.
Correct.
And will these 3 cottages affect the sewer system in any respect in terms of capacity?
No, because when it was built, it had extra capacity for any future plans we had, so this won't go over what the capacity is rated at from the state.
I'm just curious, these cottages, are they 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom,
We're limiting them to 2 bedroom.
2 bedroom?
When the septic system was replaced, it had been designed and sized for the previous replacement of all of the 26 cottages.
All 26?
So
So they got plenty of capacity. It's one of our criteria that we have to, the plan doesn't really depict much of any parking areas for vehicles. What's that plan? I mean, that's more of a planning board, but it does affect us in terms of vehicular traffic and what we have to work on in terms of our criteria.
Yeah, there's Just this, we talked about that vacant area up there. It's just a big gravel area. There's plenty of space to park
So,
6 cars.
so it'd just be used as, parking.
Yeah.
Yep, got it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. The questions or discussion from the parties or the board? Okay, at this point, I'll open the hearing up to any public input in favor of special exception. Being none, I'll also open up any public input against this proposed special exception. That would be none. So at this point, we'll close the hearing to any public input. If there's no other further questions from the board or the parties involved, any other further discussion, we'll then move to the worksheet.
I think,
John?
before we go to the
Yeah.
worksheet, if I may, so the worksheet contains only the 520 criteria. Yeah. So in addition to the 520 criteria, the applicant also has to meet the 320D 1 through 4 criteria, which, by the way, raises a bigger issue. I mean, on special exceptions like this, I wonder if the worksheet should be expanded. I don't know. We could talk about that later, but just in discussion before we do this, because when we do the worksheet, so they can get a special exception as long as what they're proposing does not substantially change the nature and purpose of the original use. So I think it's part of the original use, right?
Satisfied?
The expansion, alteration, change does not have a substantially different effect on the neighborhood. We should consider that, I think, as we go. The expansion, alteration, change does not make any existing conforming building non-conforming within the terms of this ordinance. I don't think that's happening. And then the expansion, alteration, change does not render the premises proportionally less adequate for the use in terms of the requirements of this ordinance. Non-residential site plan review shall be required for any non-residential use. So this is residential. I just wanted to test that out there. Yeah. So those all seem to be fine, at least from my perspective.
I would agree. All 4 criteria under that section 320, paragraph D. Thank you, Fred. So, John, you had mentioned all 3 were included on the special exception. We have the 3 special exception worksheets. So I'll ask the board, do we need to go through each?
I think we do. We have 3 separate
So it's on
cases here,
record as such.
but I might suggest, for the sake of getting, expediting the process, maybe what we could do is, as we do 1, we could say with regard to 22, and then go to the 23, and then go to 24,
Okay.
and maybe do all 3 criteria for each of the applications. But at least because we might say yes on 22, no on 23, yes on 24, but at least we can address them all at one time, if
Okay.
that makes sense for the rest of the board.
Do we get a chance to say maybe?
Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes or no? Oh,
Yes or no?
oh, okay.
Okay, so I'll start it off, and this will be on the worksheet for Z 21-22. As far as the acceptance, a plat has been submitted in accordance with the appropriate criteria in Article 500, Section 520B.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
In regards to the same criteria of acceptance for Z 21-23, a plat has been submitted in accordance with the appropriate criteria in Article 500, Section 520B.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
And the same criteria for Z 21-24, a plat has been submitted in accordance with the appropriate criteria in Article 500, Section 520B.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
The specific site is an appropriate location for the use, and this is with regard to case -22. The use is not being changed. It's the same residential use. The same is true for case -23, and the same is true with regard to case oh, I'm sorry, I should do them one at a time. I'm sorry. So for case -22, the site is appropriate location.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I would say it is an appropriate location for case 23,
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
and I would say it is an appropriate location for the use for case 24 for the same reason.
I agree.
I agree.
Value, factual evidence is not found that value in the district will be reduced due to incompatible land uses. I agree. It's has not found that property value will be reduced as a result of this project.
I agree. There's been no factual evidence supported by anyone that the property value in the district will be reduced due to incompatible land uses.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
With regard to Z 21-23, factual evidence is not found that the property value will be reduced. No, it's same as the previous.
I agree.
I agree.
Great.
I agree.
With regard to case Z 21-24, factual evidence is not found that property value in the district will be reduced due to incompatible land uses.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
There is no valid objection from abutters based on demonstrable fact. There was no demonstrable facts by any abutters going against this proposal.
I agree.
Okay, the 21-22, I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
And Z 21-23, there is no valid objection from abutters based on demonstrable facts.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
On Z 21-4, there is no valid objection from abutters based on demonstrable facts.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
With respect to case -22, there is no undue nuisance or serious hazard to pedestrian or vehicular traffic, including the location and design of access ways and off-street parking. Question was asked about that, and the applicant demonstrated that there was adequate off-street parking.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
With respect to -23, there is no undue nuisance or serious hazard to pedestrian or vehicular traffic, including the location and design of access ways and off-street parking. Again, there's adequate parking.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
With respect to -24, there is no undue nuisance or serious hazard to pedestrian or vehicular traffic, including the location and design of access ways and off-street parking.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Regards to facilities, adequate and appropriate facilities and utilities will be provided to ensure the proper operation of the proposed use or structure in regards to KZ 21-22.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
In regards to KZ 21-23, adequate and appropriate facilities and utilities will be provided to ensure the proper operation of the proposed use or structure.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
And in regards to KZ 21-24, adequate and appropriate facilities and utilities will be provided to ensure the proper operation of the proposed use or structure.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
There is adequate, safe and sanitary sewage disposal and water supply. The evidence submitted by the applicant is that there's been a recently approved and installed septic system for this that was designed to accommodate even greater use than what is being proposed. And the water supply is going to remain. There's nothing changing about that.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
On case dash 23, there is adequate area for safe and sanitary sewage disposal and water supply for the same reasons.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
And on case dash 24, there is adequate area and safe and sanitary sewage disposal and water supply for the same reasons.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Intent, the proposed use or structure is consistent with the spirit of this ordinance and the intent of the master plan for case dash 22.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
With regard to case Z 21-23, proposed use is consistent with the spirit of this ordinance and the intent of the master plan.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
Dash 24, the proposed use or structure is consistent with the spirit of this ordinance and the intent of the master plan.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree as well.
All right, with that being said, can we have the motion to approve case number Z 21-22, Z 21-23, and Z 21-24?
In case, Mr. Chairman, in case number Z 21-22, I make the
22, starting at 22, not 21.
Z 21-22. Is that,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead.
did I do that right?
I was wrong.
Stop scolding me when I don't need to be scolded.
Just practice.
You know, dear Lord. Hey, we all know that I'm challenged anyways, you know, so. Where was I?
Making a motion to approve.
I would motion to approve Z 21-22.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I,
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to accept Z 21-23.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve Z 21-24.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
I,
Aye. Beautiful.
Thank you.
Okay, with
Good
that
luck.
being said, it was a little bit lengthy, but we're glad we
Yeah.
resolved and cleared up any issues in our own minds, and good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Interesting, it's challenging part of this is nothing is the same.
Exactly.
Good night. Good night.
Night, Steph.
So that conference center is always going to be a challenge for us because there's nothing that conforms with any of our rules or regulations. You know,
Very interesting situation.
it is.
Back there is a 20-foot setback now between buildings. It's huge.
Well, at least, yeah,
Because you can go through there now and there's many older properties that you can barely walk through.
Right, the old
Between.
one, and that's how this, because the original ones were willy-nilly and.
Yeah.
You know, some of them were apparently, I had been there, but talking to the fire guys that you could stand between them like this and touch.
but it, you know, in the time that I've been on the variance board, and I'm sure with you, Tim, and you, Paul, you've seen a lot of change in the Christian Center anyways. I mean, most of the people that are there have tried to upgrade their facilities and do the appropriate things in terms of fire and safety and better materials and better setbacks and doing certain things. There's been no question that there's been an upgrade to the whole thing. It's just that we'll probably in our lifetime, and never again will we see something like this in Alton, this kind of a center. It's amazing. They've been here since 1894.
1863.
1863.
No.
I don't remember them coming here, but
But you were only 5 then?
He was too young to remember.
And the vast majority were just tent platforms to begin with.
No kidding.
Yeah, and then they just kind of,
The original pictures are unbelievable.
yeah.
With them all sitting on the half-cut logs and taking in the
We
sermons.
had 2 major fires within 100 years.
Yes, I understood that was in the 40s was one, and then there was one more recent than that.
The 2009 fire was,
Yeah, that was the biggest of all of them.
yeah,
hard to believe it was that long ago.
I know it. I couldn't believe that when I saw it. I think it said 9, right?
It was because it was Easter
It was Easter Sunday.
2009.
I saw it happen. It was just starting when I saw it.
and it was Columbus Day of 2009 was my first day of work here.
Wow.
The temping, filling in.
Wow. Kids in the car, we couldn't get by. And the tanks were exploding, and going into the lake,
The tanks.
the propane tank.
I,
Anyway,
when I was talking to one of the firefighters in Meredith very shortly after that, and of course, they had been here, everybody was here.
right.
They got back to the station, we're cleaning off the truck. There was part of a propane bottle on top of the truck that landed there after it exploded. They were all in all, very fortunate.
Yeah, right.
Was Scott the fire chief then?
Yes.
I think it was, yeah.
Okay, let's move on to other business. Previous business is the master plan updates from the chairman, online workshops, and the RSVP. This was put in our packet, and there's been some communication as far as on the webpage. The Alt Master Plan Committee invites members of the Alt community to upcoming master plan virtual workshops. These are 90-minute virtual workshops, enable community members to share opinions, ideas, and concerns about past, present, and future of Alton. And it defines the dates and the specifics they're going to talk about. I think it's a great idea. It's a welcoming opportunity to bring people in, whether there's 1 or 50, but at least the opportunity is out there for folks to get involved in the town. And then there's also the Survey Monkey response that went out.
Amelia, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe through the online survey, they've had 800 responses.
Really?
I think that's pretty good.
That's a very substantial number.
Mhm.
When you figure that a lot of times that's the amount of people that vote in a
Yeah.
Right.
particular,
Yep.
voting session, that's pretty substantial.
Zach, any updates from the Zach committee? I don't believe there's any.
I can speak to
Yeah.
the most recent meeting we didn't have. We only had 2 out of the 5 members. We did have a number of people from the public come in, specifically, the topic was short-term rentals.
Oh, yeah.
And a number of people very concerned about it. And so we obviously didn't have a regular meeting where we discussed all the amendments, but we were here for an hour to an hour and a half and had a roundtable. They all come up, sat down, and we just had a whole conversation about the pros and cons and, and the consensus is we'll be going forward some type of short-term rental ordinance. And we had already been discussing it. But we'll be looking at other towns and municipalities that have instituted them and try to find a regulation process that will probably entail a permitting process through the planning board. And then that will take in looking at parking, looking at septic capacity. One of the questions I emailed one of the people at DES at subsurface, the septic side of the house, to get some ideas, but because some of these places, you know, there's one house in particular I know of, they're advertising at 14 to 18 people in the house. And there's 2 bedrooms downstairs and an old studio upstairs on a 1/10 of an acre lot directly on the water. You know, so these are things that we need, that need to be addressed, but it was a very good discussion. One couple was here, they have an apartment over their garage out in the rural zone in their barn that they use as a VRBO. You know, and they've had very good experiences with it, and they're sound very conscientious about it. So it was actually very productive. And the people said, well, you know, who's going to decide this? And you are.
Right.
You know, this is going to go to the vote. It'll be part of the zoning ordinance. So
Who would enforcement would fall to you?
it would fall to our office, yeah. But the upside of that is with the permitting process, now there's something to work with. Presently, we have virtually nothing to work with. Permitting process, then it would be complaint driven. You know, I'm not going to go out and drive around and look for a problem, but it would be complaint driven. And if people know that that's how it works, that they have to have a permit, they have to abide by the conditions of that, all the butter notice and those types of things. Take a hard look. And I would like to give your number to somebody to talk to about association covenants.
Okay, sure.
Would the permit be per rental or for the unit to rent?
For the unit to rent. Yeah, it would happen because we would be looking at setting a standard for that unit.
Who would do, you said the planning board?
It would be handled, more likely handled through the planning board. But we haven't, you know, we're
I know,
still,
worked out the logistics, yeah. 'Cause-
yeah, we're still working on that because in the sense it's a business.
Right,
And we would have to look at, you know, one of the questions that's going to come up would be appropriateness for the neighborhood.
right.
You know, because people, there you go, you know,
Yeah.
and that's the situation, the person I'm going to refer you to is in the sort of the same situation.
Yeah, I mean,
Victoriously.
Mike and I we squeezed them out, but. oof,
But it's, you know, so
it was a
there's still
struggle.
there's still a lot of things to look at.
Oh, sure.
Um,
I mean, the planning board will be inundated with applications for people who are doing it, want to continue to do it, and people who want to do it that haven't, and so forth. So just logistically, there's a lot for Zach to consider in writing.
Yeah,
it is, there's a
That
lot
would-
of that.
that would be,
And we
huge.
were able to get that across to the people that this is an involved process and we
Right.
need to, you know, legally, we need to make sure we're within our boundaries and have grounds to stand on.
Right,
Which is why we're looking to other places.
yeah,
The consultant we've hired for the master plan has assisted several municipalities in writing ordinances for short-term
oh,
rentals.
nice, yeah, good, yeah.
Waterville
She's-
Valley and
she's
Gorham
good.
are 2 of them. And
Oh,
and
good.
their focuses are somewhat different.
Right,
You know, obviously Waterville Valley is, you know, they're looking, and then not that they want to discourage it, but they're looking at it a little bit different than Gorham would.
yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah.
The criteria for septic is bedrooms in the home, right?
Right, and that,
Which makes no sense when you have a flop house with 20 people renting inside. Changes everything entirely.
and that was my question to Don Bucher, who I've worked with. Then we talked for 10 years, we never met yet physically, but
right,
and if there was, you know, if somewhere, is there a factor that you, when you're looking at something like this, number of, you know, expected or anticipated number of bodies per structure or per system? Because a lot of these, you know, it may be a 1-bedroom, but they're saying they could sleep 6 because they put out some day beds or couches or whatever. And so and that's a very valid concern for us. If, you know, if we had a central sewer, it might be a little more flexible.
Airbnb has a very strict criteria
Pardon?
themselves. Airbnb does.
Yes.
And you've got to uphold to that criteria, and it's just like getting an Uber driver. If you give that person a bad rating, so goes their their vocation.
Right.
So the same thing, if you say, yeah, there's 5 people coming, I mean, to the point where you have to submit your license front and back as you are now the renter, the sole, you're the person that's renting this place, because people used to say, I'm renting it, and then drop off 6 18-year-olds and have a good day. So
Yeah,
there's a lot of, you know,
Yeah, but
things already in place.
That's Airbnb. I mean, that's
Yeah.
a private business. I
Yeah.
mean, so
but there's,
you can't have a town ordinance that said it has to be Airbnb. I mean.
No.
No,
no,
exactly.
we, just, you know, that's why I'm using the term short-term rentals and
Right.
not,
Airbnb,
because people rent these things through Craigslist.
Right.
There's no control over,
right,
you know, what that is.
right.
One of the running scams now is people rent a house through Craigslist. The people show up on the doorstep. The house is not for rent.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
they've
yeah.
spent $4,000, given someone $4,000 for this house on the lake. When they show up, the owners are like, get out,
Right.
get off my property.
But there's
Oh my
also
God.
many, many, many people in this type of area that have been doing this for decades.
Right.
Before any of these
Oh, yeah.
acronyms.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, Tim comes every summer, Frank comes to my place every summer, John comes, you know, it's just,
Right.
it's what goes on. Everybody understands, but yeah, it's quite a
There's
dynamic.
a lot on the table. Seasonality matters too. It might be beneficial to have more winter renters for skiing or something, and more restrictive in the summer when it's everybody's here.
Yeah. And that's,
Kinds of
again,
variables.
there's so many, you know, and I
Right.
sit down and start writing down things, and then I go away for a day or so and come back and write a couple more, and,
Right,
you know, or talk to some people and get other inputs.
right.
So it's gonna be a challenge.
My biggest problem, and we discussed this last time, my own personal problem with it is that if I buy a single family home on a nice neighborhood street, 6 or 8 of us, much like your situation,
Yeah.
Frank, you know, there's more people there, but that's not why you bought that home, to then suddenly have your neighbors on either side behind you, turning this into basically a weekly motel.
Exactly.
And you don't, whatever type of people are coming, whatever, you know,
The issues that we had on our street, we went to that person that owned it. He didn't live there, you know? So whoever he could rent it to, he rented it to, and sometimes we had 2 people there, and sometimes we had 16 people there,
Oh.
you know? And I must just say, in most cases, it wasn't too bad, but then there were some times, but we never knew, you know, every week there was somebody different.
Turnover every week.
Every week,
Right.
you know,
Never rented more than a week.
never more than
They
a week. It was
squeezed dollar out
every
of that
week.
property.
Okay, so, you know, it's, you know, it's,
I think the oversight should be as close to home as possible, the neighborhood, the people who live on the street. It's much harder for the town to put these guidelines in. It has to be pretty general, because the people who live in that community are the ones directly affected by that.
Absolutely, absolutely.
right,
I
but
mean, to me, it's pretty simple in my view. It's a business.
Right.
And we already, you know, all the reasons that the zoning exists in the first place to keep a sludge factory from being constructed next to a family home with little kids and the
Right.
horrible odors and activity in the trucks and everything. You just don't do it. That's what zoning is all about. We already regulate what types of businesses can be conducted in certain zones. And to me, it's a business. And I mean, if it were free, people wouldn't do it. So they're doing it for a commercial purpose only, to make money off of doing it. It's a commercial enterprise, it's a business, and therefore it should fall under the zoning that's already established in the town as to what can be done where. And, you know, I mean, I don't, just because somebody came up with an internet idea and called it Airbnb and makes billions of dollars off of everybody who does this, doesn't mean that it gets around zoning.
Right.
You know, I mean, I just don't, I don't get it. I mean, people are doing it. It caught on. People just decide, okay, good. I'll go move out of my house and I'll use it for a multi-rental, 2 days a week, you know, whatever. Well, you're running a lodging facility. You know, lodging is not permitted in the zone.
well, in the entire lake,
Yeah,
think about it.
yeah,
how many people have bought homes, cottages for rent, to rent them?
I know.
Okay, they've been doing it for
Forever.
forever.
There's also people who will move out for a month or 2 months, rent it, and then move back in. Because in that month, they make the money to pay the taxes on. the
Right.
property.
Exactly.
There's people who won't move out.
It's just with the
I mean,
mortgage.
There's no question there's benefit to the owner. There's no question, but, you know, it's conducting a business. And the question is the business permitted in that zone? And just because somebody had the idea, oh, let's do it, doesn't mean you can, you know.
But there are people who still live in the home while the renter is there. They
No,
rent
no,
a
I
room.
understand, but it's a,
So what you're saying is we do have we have restrictions, you know, like, let's call it Lakeshore residential,
right,
Okay.
right.
okay? We don't require certain businesses to be in Lakeshore residential.
Right.
Do we allow rentals?
You know, I'll never forget it. So many years ago, we had someone that came to the ZBA. She was a clinical psychologist and she was moving out of the city or whatever. She moved into her lake house. She was on 11D in the Lakeshore Residential. And she said, I still have some patients. They're going to come to my house. I'm going to sit with them in my office. I'm going to give them therapy. Okay. And maybe 3 or 4 a week. It'd be just like if she had somebody over for a cup of tea or whatever, but she was honest enough to come to the ZBA and to say she wanted to conduct that business in her home in the Lakeshore Residential on 11D. We denied her. I thought it was the greatest thing in the world. I wanted to vote in her favor in the worst way. I thought this is the greatest thing. It's great for you. It's great for the people who need you. It all works out beautifully. Guess what? It was conducting a business that was not permitted in the zone, and we denied it because she didn't meet the criteria. No, but I'm saying that as harsh as that was, and as, you know, that would have been, you know, big deal, you know, to have that. Just because she wanted to do that, or people to come up with something on the internet, the zone is the zone. It permits it or it doesn't. And it almost, to me, is like, you know, but now it becomes very hard to enforce. So I don't know. I mean, this is a discussion for Zach, really, you know, for the zoning amendment committee.
I just
because-
wanted to, you know,
Right, but that's something I think it has to be addressed by the town. A decision has to be made, what should be done, and then it should be taken to the voters. You know, so,
Or you'll get some voter turnout on that one.
yeah,
That's gonna be a tough one.
and that's why I was very adamant in, you know, the people we were talking with said that you're gonna be the ones out there.
yes,
You know, you're gonna be, yes, we try to get things changed. Lumberyard, 3 years in a row, we still couldn't get people to understand that the definition of lumberyard in our zoning ordinance is where you go buy building supplies.
right,
Everybody wanted to call it a mill, you know, lumber mill, whatever. It just, you know, so that's that's why I said we will need your support and you talking to people out there. They hear it from you and not,
right.
you know, they hear it from me. It's like, oh, well, you know, whatever. But.
Right. In regards to new business, they're looking for a ZBA member to sit on the ZAC committee. I know Jessica's been reaching out to a few of us. So throw that out there. If anybody is interested, please get in touch with Jessica. They do need a ZBA member on the ZAC committee.
Just one,
Just one.
aren't they using 2 people so do we already have one?
Yeah, Mike's running a conflict with being able to meet his schedule. And
Oh, okay, but we have someone else. Who else is it? Paul?
also-
Okay, all right, so we just need one more.
Yeah.
So there'll be 2.
I would do it, but I'm on so many committees now.
I'm messing up. big
I'm
time on the-
overloaded.
On the master plan committee, I said yes to that, and then I've been a dud on it, so I hate to take something else, and I'll give it some thought. When do they need the answer by?
The next meeting's not till the end of this month.
Okay. I believe this is a correspondence.
No, there is correspondence in there for you though.
And I can speak briefly. What I wanted to show you, remember West Alton Marina was in here with their project and their ongoing, expansion. They got the variance to use the Lakeshore Residential Zone for this is the first building. This is the maintenance building.
Wow.
So they're getting, and they've done substantial work over
It's
on the other side.
unbelievable. It's unbelievable if you go down there. It's incredible.
Absolutely incredible job that they've done there.
Yeah.
Holy moly.
I've seen, there's more been done there than on some massive highway projects.
Yes, absolutely.
I've gone by boat,
Yep.
jet ski, and I've just traveled the road. I mean, it's just incredible.
It is incredible.
The swimming pool is in and they pulled the permit to construct the gatehouse building. They've already built the store and the office and put in new pumps, new gas pumps and everything else.
It's just
This
incredible.
this is a major step for being able to do maintenance and that type of thing. And then the new boat storage buildings will be going, probably the next couple of years.
And the quality of the work is second.
Yeah.
It's really,
It's been done very, very well.
place has always been top notch. I valeted there a number of years ago on my boat and just,
I'll tell you what I was very interested in seeing as I was going down the canal, the channels, was the cabanas that they've used that, some of the bigger boats
Yeah.
have cabanas where they either use storage or they have hibachis and, they'll do, people are doing it as a destination,
yeah,
and then I think they're sleeping on the boats.
some people never even take the boat out.
Don't even take the boat out.
No, they just come up for
I
the
don't blame
weekend and they live on their boat.
Can you tell me which ones those are so I can go visit them? Really?
But there are activities as well. They're what do they call it? I think they call it cabana crawl and
Yep.
some different fun things. Really, Brian, he's done a fantastic job there.
That's an interesting door.
Oh, it's not complete.
Oh, I was wondering, like, how the heck is that?
They're still, I was there doing an inspection, so they're still, the
gotcha.
building is not moved in. yet.
Dutch garage door.
It's for boats that go out look longer than what they need, okay,
What the heck?
interesting door. That's very good, Paul.
West Alton Marina?
Yes.
Yeah.
That the canal right past the.
Yeah, where the sandbar is.
I've never been down there by
Oh,
boat.
It's
Oh,
interesting.
Mike, you gotta go down. There's gas down there too. I mean,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they got a grocery store.
Convenient for the gas too.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, you gotta see. I mean, this guy has spent a ton.
Yeah.
I mean, a ton of money. If he hasn't spent 10 million bucks.
Oh, it has to be.
This one alone was $1 million.
Yeah. If he
This
hasn't spent,
building.
yeah.
Yeah.
If he hasn't spent 10 million bucks,
Yeah.
easily.
So it's is it like a marina or
It's a marina.
a place for people to leave their boats, like you said, leave them at a dock and
Yes.
socialize and.
Oh, yeah.
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 That's one thing that's never done on this lake, so that's kind of new, at least for this area, isn't
And
it?
I'm telling you, every finger of the dock, they all have their own flags on their boat.
Well, you gotta
And
have
that's
That's
it
like
with
a
the
yacht- that's
Gold
like- That's
Coast.
what the yacht clubs are like on Long Island, where I grew up. People have 40 footers, they never even go out. And they have refrigerators and
Oh, yeah.
and cabanas with
Oh, yeah.
grills.
But you
and
gotta have a
stuff.
slip to do that.
You need a slip.
Yeah, well, you got the slip.
But he's able to now, where the boat storage buildings are presently, are going to be slips. And that was quite an achievement because he was able to prove that his grandfather had filled all that. That's not, so he's able to take out the fill.
So make it water,
It was quite a chat because you don't normally,
right,
to go and dredge new
Yes,
slips
yeah.
somewhere is,
right.
Is he still planning the RV camping
that's on
down the road?
it's kind of in the back of his mind, but he hasn't asked permission for it. He's getting it. Now he's just getting everything,
It's unbelievable.
Oh, and the site work
Yeah, the
was
site work's
was incredible.
the site work over off the Mahat Shore side
Yeah.
was just unbelievable.
Unbelievable.
Because number one, it was just littered with boulders but there's also ledge. And
They
so
blasted it, they crushed it,
Oh.
they
there's
reused everything there.
tons
I
of,
gotta tell
You
you,
would see
gotta
on a
go down
massive
there to
highway
take a look at it.
project,
It's
they're like.
absolutely
Okay,
incredible.
Yeah, that
Who
he have
does
in
this
it, yeah.
financing?
I don't know.
Do you know what the capacity will be?
I don't know.
That'd be interesting.
I think he's got 300 in there and they're
Yeah,
putting
see,
in.
I think it's Meredith.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's I think the Meredith Bank is financed.
For-
them. I
good for
think-
all.
I saw a sign out there, you know, financed by the Meredith Bank. You
Wow.
know, I'll tell you, it, big. How many slips does he have? 300?
I think it's 300.
I think it's close, and he's gonna add another almost 300.
No kidding. Wow.
He's the only place on the lake you can do this. There's no one else that's got a marina
It
on
has
the
the
lake that has
space
any
of it,
room to
right.
do what he's
No, the
doing.
room.
And it's, you can't see it from the road, you
Right.
know? He did a nice job. He's kept it and it's neat as a pin. I tell you, you can't find a scrap of trash there.
This came before the ZBA?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's two halves. There's the operational part of the marina and the original part of the marina. Then just across the brook is where all this is going. And that actually was in the Lakeshore Residential Zone.
Oh,
So they come in for a variance for that. And it actually turns out to be a much less intensive use of the property than it would be if they'd subdivided it up and at this point right now in this market, whatever, there would be someone looking to subdivide it up into as many as possible to sell them out. So it actually is, because at the end of the season, everybody goes home.
right.
You know, the maintenance building will probably be used year round, but they put the boats in the storage buildings and close the doors and then come back in the spring.
How much property is over there? How many acres, do you know?
That was, I want to say at least 6 or 7 acres.
There's gonna be like metal structure outbuildings for storage, like off the lake, obviously, and.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who did the work? Who's the
That's
contract?
Constructs.
Constructs? is
Yeah,
the
they're out of,
Conia,
well, no, Constructs.
Belmont, is it? Belmont?
No, Bridgewater, not Bridgewater, just north of Ashland.
Ashland, yeah.
Bristol?
Excellent company.
Bristol?
It's a
No.
family owned.
It's Bridgewater's next to, if you go up Route 3
Yeah, no, with me.
and you go through Ashland, I think Bridgewater's the next
Yeah.
one up.
Okay, yeah.
Excellent company. They,
Oh,
And
yeah.
then Plymouth
family
is-
owned.
I mean, that's beautiful. That's great work.
All righty, could we
Yeah.
get a approval of minutes? Tim, you were not here, Mike was not here, so.
I have, so page 2. From the bottom, 1, 2, 3, probably 4 paragraphs. It says Justin Passay Esquire, Donnie Tucker and Sandella clarified there is no intention to be a gravel yard. I don't know about gravel yard. I think I was asking, above it, it says construction yard. Maybe he used the term gravel yard.
Yeah,
All right, I just raised that as a question. I guess we knew what we were talking about because I went to the definition of construction yard. I don't think we have gravel yard as a term,
No, we don't.
but he might have said that.
Contractor's yard. We have the term
Contractor's yard?
contractor's yard,
Okay,
and his, part of the original, it's this Sadco, right?
yes,
Yeah, part of the original proposal was to have a place to store his equipment, and he's. and
right.
he's not
He
gonna do
scrapped
that.
it. I remember.
He scrapped
Okay,
that.
so we'll leave gravel because that might be what he said. And then on page 3, 1, 2, 3 paragraphs from the top. Second sentence, Mr. Jones stated it would be around 578. So in other words, Mr. Rich asked what the elevation of the slab of the large building would be. Mr. Jones stated it would be around 578. I don't know, in relation to elevation, was that a correct number, 578? You guys were beyond
That
me at
sounds,
that
yes,
point.
yes.
It
That
does?
sounded right.
Okay.
That sounds reasonable.
Okay, and then second from the, oh, I'm not gonna get that picky. Um, It says this criteria, I would have probably said these criteria, given that criteria is a plural. Can we go to page 6?
You gotta be kidding me. Will you
Um,
please?
let me
Will you-
see
Can
here.
we move on, Mr. Chairman?
Adequate
Can we
parking.
move on?
So
Okay.
on page 6, at the very
Who do you
top,
think you are?
at the very top, the paragraph that spills over, it says there is adequate parking. Did we say that? Did that come up? Like, parking isn't a criteria for the special exception, is it? It's maybe,
Vehicular traffic.
Vehicular traffic part and.
And parking.
pedestrian.
oh, is it off-street parking? Okay. So that's it, and nothing needs to be changed.
I didn't see any
I'm gonna,
issues.
unless anybody else has any questions, changes, or corrections, I would move that we approve the minutes as presented.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good.
So Frank, do you have some correspondence?
Can I,
Stan? No?
Frank, please,
Yeah.
Please.
yeah.
Frank,
Well, now,
somebody,
Jessica said she was
Anyone?
gonna put in there a notice about the
She did.
Housing Board of Appeals, which was recently instituted in the last 2 years by the legislature. And it is essentially now, if someone is unhappy with the decision of the ZBA and go through the process and the ZBA doesn't hear it, they don't go to court. They go to the Housing Board of Appeals,
really?
and the same for planning. So it's a step to go to before you go to court.
Before you get to the court?
Yes.
Wow.
And there's going to be a webinar on it. Jessica had that information in
I
it,
saw
and
that.
she would like, particularly, I think it would be good, I know it will be good for us
Right.
as zoning board, because it will they've already heard one or two, and you know, I
So
don't
it's
know.
already passed. It's the
Yeah,
law.
it's instituted,
Wow.
so it's in effect and working.
So what is, are they in Concord or?
Yes,
And it's a new board that was,
it's called the Housing Board of Housing Appeals Board.
Wow.
who's on the board?
All right.
Do we know?
There's I can get that information.
Yeah, just
It's,
curious.
it's very specific. It has to be made up of an attorney and made up of a surveyor and made up of contractor, you know, there's
Wow.
very specific positions that have to be to be a board member. So.
Hmm.
Get that, well, I'll get that to you. We'll email.
Yeah.
So
Do they have any clout? In other words, can they make a decision or
No, they do.
Yeah.
they do make
Versus
decisions?
this is, and then I suppose if you don't like their decision, you appeal it to the court, but they serve as the next appeal level beyond courts,
That's
where it
interesting.
was the court.
It is interesting. Oh,
I don't-
can I,
Does anybody hear this beep? I hear this beep.
No, Frank,
Is it your
Take-
pacemaker right
Frank.
now?
Frank, take your medicine, take it now.
See what I mean, Mike? Okay, let me tell you,
Listen. No,
I'm telling you, the handful on the wood chipper is, I'm sharpening it up.
I think, are we approving applications or are we granting
We are
applications?
granted.
We're granting applications because approving is just like, I think we're granting applications.
So, John, just curious, okay, how many new permits for construction homes in the town right now?
For new homes, for new single families, we're right about 40. We
40?
were at 40.
Wow.
And we were at 50, we finished last year at 54, 41 of those from July to the end of the year. And we are doing a monthly report. The selectmen wanted an activity report from all the departments, which has actually been real good because now we're getting a look at what we're actually doing. We issued, we received payment for 124 permits in August for over $13,000. I did 96 inspections. Break it down, it averages down to about 5 a day because we're doing, but that doesn't count the days I was off or issuing permits to Dave's
Right.
Melinda's. Septic reviews in 2019, I did 88 septic reviews. In 2020, I did 140. And I'm on track for that. We're at, what I say, we've brought in to date, as of the end of August, end of August, I'm sorry, we brought in $70,000 in fees.
Wow.
My budget was 109. So I'm hoping that I know we're going to be very close to almost breaking even. But yeah, the level, and it's not slowing down. Level of activity.
Bears property, 2 houses, 2 of the lots of the 3 lots that were vacant. Okay.
Sold.
I just issued one.
No,
I
starting
issued-
construction
Yeah, I issued the permit on one of them just 2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. And are you ready for this? The Eagles Nest. They can only work from August 30th to December 30th every year. They can't, no construction during that time. These houses are gonna take 4-5 years to put up. Can you believe it?
Because of the Eagles.
Because of the Eagle's nest. That's when they're, I guess they're mating and doing all this stuff.
That's when they have the family over from
Yeah,
the
yeah.
other Eagle communities. It's like their reunion.
So it's like an Eagle Airbnb.
So two out of the
Eagle
three,
Airbnb.
2 out of the 3 lots, I think you'll be getting another application shortly.
I talked to, I talked to someone just this week on
Yeah.
the next lot over from the gazebo. lot.
And the only reason I know this is Miller Engineering has done the testing on both of the lots. And he, the other day he was down below, he said, Frank, you know anybody that's got an excavator? He says, I got my auger stuck. Couldn't get it out. He says, I gotta get it out before the Eagles, I won't be able to get it out, for a whole year,
How big are these lots? I assume that.
They're
A couple acres.
couple
Yeah,
acres
yeah,
each.
a couple plus acres.
But I'm gonna tell you, that if you know the thing, it goes down precipitously, okay, to the water.
Yeah.
It's gotta be close to a 30-foot drop, I would say.
At least.
But there were 3 vacant lots, okay,
Yeah.
so 2 of them are started. And I guess the people that have bought them know that they're gonna have to wait, which is interesting.
Yeah. In fact, one of the one that's starting construction will be before the board next month for a special exception for an accessory dwelling unit. Second, it's the mother's gonna have a place up there, so.
That's that particular lot is the closest one. That's the one that's right on the point.
Oh, okay.
Okay,
Primo view.
there's one to the left and one to the right, but that one is right on the point. And I met I just happened to be down there because I was trying to figure out where the auger bit. And I met the people, and they seem like a very young
Yeah.
couple.
Yeah.
Just briefly.
Yeah.
So it was interesting.
Is that Eagle's Nest situation anywhere else on the lake or just in that specific area, or is that?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, we have a number of eagle nests all
Okay,
over.
that eagle nest has produced an incredible amount
Has it?
of,
It's an old mess.
it's an old nest, okay? It's gotta be 8 foot in diameter.
Are you kidding?
Oh, no,
The
I'm
biggest
not
nest
kidding
of
you.
any bird.
I'm not kidding. You
It's-
go out on
it's
the
half the
lake,
size of this table.
Are we gonna-
you gotta see it. It's
I'm
just.
gonna move to adjourn, yeah. May I? Move to adjourn?
You certainly.
I'm sorry.
No,
No,
I
I'm
didn't
just-
mean to interrupt you, but
Amelia's,
Yeah, Amelia's-
we got the recording
On-
going.
right,
so-
the record's on.
I'll second that motion.